Arsenal entered the post-Wenger era determined not to repeat the mistakes made under the Frenchman. For all his brilliant talent development and intricate attacking play, Arsene's conservatism in the transfer market arguably prevented him from ending his Gunners' career with a major trophy, not least in 2015-16, when Arsenal finished second after only adding Petr Cech the previous summer. But 3 years on from Le Prof's departure, and Arsenal are not only no better off than they were with him, they lack the watchability and unified vision which consoled their fans during the fallow years. Multiple key decision makers have been and gone, countless millions have been wasted on player fees, and Arsenal have scored fewer goals and taken fewer points in the last 2 campaigns than they did in any season under Wenger. However, while their on-field failures cost Unai Emery his job and torched Mikel Arteta's popularity despite an FA Cup win, the cracks are more than stylistic, with the club completely incapable of competently building a squad, with a first 11 which has arguably got worse, not better, since 2018. So how did a club famed for common sense and bargain buys become so haphazard in the market? Who is responsible, and can fans hope for a better future? Today we put on the rubber gloves and delve into the mess at Arsenal to find out. After 2 decades of Wenger acting as coach, director of football and head of talent development, Arsenal quite reasonably decided to share those responsibilities out. They brought in Raul Sanllehi from Barcelona and Sven Mislintat from Dortmund to assist chief executive Ivan Gazidis, but apparently didn't consider whether their approaches would mesh. While Sanllehi, hired from perhaps Europe's most incompetent super club, favoured using contacts and agents to find new players, Mislintat came from a setup focused on using scouting and data to find undervalued stars and promising youngsters. And though both men have since moved on, the club has remained caught between the 2 approaches, unsure whether to buy young and build towards a top team in the long term, or spend on experience in an attempt to secure a quick return to the Champions League. Believing 1 or 2 signings could take the club back to the top 4, Arsenal have brought in old players with big wages hoping to bridge the gap, adding unreliable veterans like Sokratis, Cedric, David Luiz and Stefan Lichtsteiner over the last few years. And the problem is that when those players don't work, they add nothing except zeros to the wage bill. If the Gunners had targeted youngsters instead, it's hard to imagine that they'd have fallen further down the table, and those players would have improved and developed relationships on the field, or at worst, they'd be sellable for reasonable fees. However, even some smart younger signings haven't worked out, partially due to the change in managers and lack of direction off the pitch. When Mikel Arteta won the FA Cup after just 8 months in charge, the club rewarded him with a promotion from head coach to manager, and with that, handed him more power in squad building. That meant that he had the freedom to ostracise players he didn't like. And so, while Arsenal could at one point have sold Lucas Torreira and Matteo Guendouzi for north of £60 million combined, they've tanked their value instead, and will be lucky to end up with £25 million total for the pair once the Uruguayan leaves. That means that even if Arteta proves to be a great coach, his talent evaluation and aims in the market could continue to hold the club back. Reports suggest that he was the driving force in handing out bad contracts to old players like Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and Willian, and the effect of those poor decisions can't be forgotten about. Though Arsenal have been linked with Lautaro Martinez and Tammy Abraham this summer, the path to signing either would have been blocked by having around £36 million in salary tied up in Oba. And if they'd used Reiss Nelson instead of Willian, it's unlikely they would have finished lower than the 8th they managed, and they'd have had a homegrown forward they could sell on for decent money, rather than scrabbling to loan the 21-year-old out while attempting to offload the Brazilian's wages, an eye-watering $220k a week, 15 times more than Nelson's. Edu, meanwhile, seems to have brought chaos, not clarity, to Arsenal's dealings. The former Gunners midfielder clearly favoured an agent-led approach in his first summer before leading a brutal cull of the club's scouting network in favour of focusing on data, only to begin hiring scouts again just a few months later. And if he doesn't have a clear vision and Arteta ends up leaving the Emirates, the next coach could inherit a squad built to the Spaniards' specifications rather than for long-term health. That's how a half-decade in the wilderness turns into permanent residence. So, the situation off the field is a mess, but when it comes to assessing what's happening on it, Arsenal don't seem much better. In the summer of 2020, Arsenal had a clear creativity problem, covered up by a white-hot finishing streak from Aubameyang, who netted 22 from 16 expected goals in the Prem. By XG, the attack was only 9th best in the Prem, worse than Wolves, and was taking just 10.7 shots a game, ranking between Norwich and Newcastle at 15th in the division. And to make matters worse, Arteta knew he had nobody in the squad who could help the following campaign, with Emil Smith-Rowe inexperienced and injured, and Mesut Ozil frozen out. But despite this entirely predictable situation, Arsenal didn't buy an attacking midfielder, abandoning interest in Houssem Aouar in favour of securing Thomas Partey for big money, and consequently enduring a horrific half-season in which the Gunners' attack slipped to 15th in the league, putting up just 1.1 expected goals a game, unbelievably behind Roy Hodgson's Crystal Palace. And while the problem was eventually fixed with a move to 4-2-3-1, the emergence of ESR, and the arrival of Martin Ødegaard, the club doesn't seem to have learned its lesson. Having put together the third best defensive record in England in 2020-21, Arteta is still focusing resources on the back line, refusing to play the highly promising William Saliba, and instead spending a further £50 million on a centre-back, Brighton's Ben White, a talented, young and homegrown player, but hardly a vital acquisition given the continued issues in attack, and making it 6 consecutive summers in which the club has bought a centre-half. But even if you think a centre-back was necessary and White was the right man, Arsenal's allocation of resources is questionable. Having cut corners to fill out the squad, they've overpaid for their marquee signings, forking out excessive sums on White, Partey and most notably Nicolas Pepe. As good as Partey looks when he plays, would Arsenal really have been worse off with two £25 million players instead of him last season? If we've painted a bleak picture so far, we can at least offer some hope. As expensive as White was, he's part of a transfer strategy which seems much more coherent than it has done previously. Since January 2021, almost everyone signed or credibly linked with Arsenal — Ødegaard, Lokonga, Aouar, Tavares, White, Maddison, Buendia, Neves, Bissouma, Locatelli, Martinez and Ramsdale — fits a pattern. Under 25, with an emphasis on homegrown and PL experience. That is an expensive way to shop, but could prove intelligent if further restrictions on foreign players come into effect. And more importantly, it suggests that Arsenal have accepted the reality that they probably won't make the top 4 and certainly won't compete for the title for some time. Judging by targets alone, we'd guess that the plan is now to build a squad to compete in 2 or 3 years, not for the fantasy of lifting silverware next May. And with plenty more to come from good buys like Gabriel, Tierney and Martinelli, it's not hard to imagine a strong Arsenal team in 2024. There's also reason to hope that improved performances will improve sales. When a team is flying, their off-cuts are always considered more valuable. For example, Liverpool were able to sell Marco Grujic for $8 million and Harry Wilson for $12 million this summer, as well as Ryan Brewster for $23 million last year, despite zero top-level experience, more than funding their swoop for Ibrahima Konate with players they were never going to use anyway. Meanwhile, Arsenal can't find buyers for Nelson, who excelled in the Bundesliga under Julian Nagelsmann, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, who's already a useful PL fullback, or for Eddie Nketiah, who has a handful of top-flight goals to his name. It'll be hoped that a better Premier League performance in 21-22, the success of Smith Rowe and Saka, and Joe Willock's £25 million switch to Newcastle can make Hale End a money spinner once again and fund a genuine resurgence. As much as Arsenal fans lament the lack of investment from owner Stan Kroenke, the sad truth is that the club has had the resources to succeed in the post-Wenger years, if they'd only had the strategy and intelligence to do so. Since 2017-18, and with figures correct as of mid-August 2021, only the Manchester clubs and Chelsea have a larger net spend in the Premier League than Arsenal's £265 million, suggesting that overpaying and poor selling are responsible for their league position, not a depleted war chest. City, United and Chelsea all boast greater financial power than Arsenal, and those 3 clubs, plus Liverpool, have squads clearly superior to Arteta's, meaning that the Gunners need to find a way to catch up in quality while wasting as little cash as possible. To do that, they'll need to get smart, fast, or face a future in which the memory of their successes under Wenger is the only comfort. So that's our take on Arsenal's horrific transfer business over the last few years, but what's your take and who do you think has been the worst buy at the Emirates? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, drop us a like and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell and you'll never miss an upload. We'll see you next time.